Okay, we are back. Another episode come together. Wow. I'm sorry, last week I was actually expecting to have two more podcasts come out. I recorded one, but it turned out to just be complete chaos. And it was fun. It was one of those, it was December, I think, 24th or 5th. And a bunch of guys, bunch of my buddies, Kiwi, Guy, Shua, Elad, we all got together, we grilled, drank, hung out, and recorded. Of course, the problem is that the more people and the more distractions, the less coherent the podcast. And I don't almost ever listen back to podcasts. I don't usually do. I've listened to bits and pieces of some of the a couple episodes if someone was asking me questions and I don't remember what I was talking about, or just make sure that the audio is good, or at least not terrible. But this was just the content was just a mess, and I thought that I could do better, and I thought that you deserve better. So I decided not to put that one out. It's the second or third time I did that. There was one time did an episode with my friend Yosef, who I haven't done an episode with in a long time since the beginning. Even though I think that if he and I were closer to one another physically, we'd probably do a bunch of more episodes together. But he's very much not a remote person or a Zoom person, and he's very much an in-person person and having full experiences embodied, literally in person. I have a couple of things that I was going to talk about today that I'm very excited to discuss. Number one, I see a lot of people are doing, and it's a cute idea, is kind of just like a 2024 recap. Um, if you want a funny version of that, I would recommend Netflix's Torching 2024. Nah, I mean, it was good. It was original. I think that Mark Normand and Sam Morril were the highlights of of that of that show. Um, but I think they're the best bits. But that's just my opinion. So best of 2024, and just yesterday, Andrew Huberman released an episode talking for about 4 hours with Jordan Peterson, and they cover a lot of fascinating topics, and it's so much fun to watch or listen rather to how in how what's the word to describe it? How multi-layered and faceted, multifaceted, multi-layered, and how applicable and relevant Jordan Peterson's philosophy and perspective and train of thought is. He is completely capable of having conversations with different people from different backgrounds, asking him different types of questions of his perspective and philosophy, but with different contexts and applications. And part of what I think, I mean, especially if we're going to talk, especially if we want to talk scientifically, part of what truth is would be something that is consistent across the spectrum that doesn't necessarily change so much with different contexts, and it's consistent throughout um, all sorts of different areas. An object in motion stays in motion. It doesn't make a difference which object it is, right? It doesn't make a difference what type of motion it is. It doesn't make a difference where the motion is. So a lot of Jordan Peterson's perspective and philosophy, I find, is very much applicable no matter who's asking the questions and what context they're asking the questions in. The notion of responsibility is a good notion. The notion of selfishness, narcissism is obviously bad, and I don't care what the application is across the board, across the spectrum. And he's scientific about his morals and ethics, which I think is really interesting and really fun. And one of the things that they talk about, and they spend a good amount of time on, is the notion of prayer. And prayer, and that kind of struck a little bit of a chord with me in a good way, because I've had a very complicated relationship with prayer in general throughout my life. As growing up as an Orthodox Jew and remaining one until today, prayer was always an essential part of my life. Not only was it an essential part of my life, but synagogues and shuls and prayer locations were always an essential part of my life. They're an essential part of community, of the feeling of wherever you are. If you get 10 Jews together to pray together, then you create a sense of home and community, and you elevate whatever your momentary experience is to a bigger context and a bigger picture. It's saying that the moment that you're living in is a moment, but it's a moment within the context and the grand scheme of a lot of other important things, including prayer. But, you know, then you actually have to think about, and I've thought about this quite a bit, what's the point of it? So, I mean, I've been taught, especially, Hebrew prayers. I've been taught prayers since I was essentially able to read. Um, and one of the things that I never really thought about or asked for many, many, many years is praying to who? What am I praying for? What's my prayer supposed to be? Is there a right way or a wrong way to pray? What does that, and what does that mean exactly? And there's a lot of answers and there's a lot of different takes. And it's been developing for me for a very long time. I used to, when I was young, even when I was as far as in middle school, I was in, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth grade, and I had a crush on this girl, and there was zero chance that she had paid any kind of attention to me. And it's actually amazing how our psychology works, because I got, even as you got older and you got more mature, and like there was really no reason for us to not be friends other than the fact that I was just intimidated by the fact that I used to have a crush on her. I was never able to bring myself to be friends with her, even though I became eventually friends with her, or friendly with her older brother, and on good terms. It's just like there was just it was such an intense feeling when I was young that I don't think that I was able to kind of remove myself from what those feelings were and have like a regular conversation with her. But I used to pray every day, because especially Orthodox Judaism, we pray 3 times a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once at night. And I used to pray every day for this girl to like me. And then, and as I got older and as I got more mature, you ask, there are certain philosophical questions that I think are meant to have us think, and are meant to have some kind of repercussions. For example, you know, we often don't know what's best for us, right? Like we often desire things that we might feel like we want, or we might not know, it might appear that we want it, but it's definitely not what's best for us. And if you're praying for that, does that mean that you should get it? Does that mean you shouldn't get it? If your prayers are answered, your prayers aren't answered. Does that mean that someone's listening, someone's ignoring it? Does it mean that you're supposed to be, is the notion of prayer even supposed to be this kind of weird exchange of service and good, right? Like I dedicate time in my day, and I say certain words, and I put away my phone and work and computer aside to meditate and talk to God, and um, and then He's supposed to just give me what I want. Like, is that what the point of the relationship is? Is that what the point of the prayer is? And that notion never really stuck with me very well. I never really felt comfortable with that, because again, who knows what is best for us? And yeah, all you could do is try and accomplish what's best for you, and then you learn through your experience what's good for you or not. But there's also something uh, that I felt was either inauthentic or potentially even unhealthy about having a relationship with God that's contingent on His ability to give you what you want when you feel like it in exchange for a prayer. The way that my friends used to talk about it was like one of those old school candy machines or toy machines where you put in a quarter and you turn it and you got, in exchange for the quarter, you get a toy or a slot or anything like that, right? And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose and sometimes you get the toy you want and sometimes you don't. But I don't know. It never really struck me as something that was too real. And then I was exposed to the perspective and to the opinion that, because that prayer is not necessarily searching for anything or asking for anything for yourself per se. Not that you can't, and not even necessarily that you shouldn't. It should. I don't believe personally that it should be the focal point of prayer is asking for things for yourself. But then, what would it be? And one of the and there the first, at least in Judaism, the first source for the notion of prayer comes during creation. And I think all this holds up as truth one way or the other, in terms of just as an idea and as a concept and as reality. I think it's really cool. So we have this notion that's actually been, going on that's through through many, many religions and through many, many philosophical perspectives, and a lot of people have considered this, that the world is kind of chaos and not necessarily thinking, and it's functioning, it's happening, right? But I mean, I don't think we, as far as I know, we don't say that animals have the same level of consciousness, awareness, communication as people do. We know that they're reflexive. We know that they could be creative to a certain extent, but we know that they don't talk. We know that they're not. There's no idea for an animal to give something a shot. For the Hail Mary play does not exist for animals, right? But what's that? What's that idea of like trying for something that probably won't work out, right? Because humans try that all the time, right? Expression shoot your shot, the expression, YOLO, try to live your dreams. Just the notion of dreaming itself is a very human concept, is a very exclusive to human concept. And so this world is naturally chaotic. The way that nature works, the way that Darwinism works, the way that evolution works, the way that just the entire world is always just constantly shifting landscapes, and some things are dying, and some things are living, and some things are growing, and some things are beautiful, and some things are evil, and some things are amazing, and some things are terrible. But there's only one there's only one species, as far as we know, that is aware of all these happenings. The other parts of the system are operating within its limits, within their functions. Right? You have the system of Earth. You have this system of the world of life, and everything that's participating in it is not necessarily self-aware of the fact that it's taking that it's part of it. But people are aware that we're part of it, and so we are to use the line the Grateful Dead song, we are the eyes of the world. We are consciousness is, and it's also interesting because if you're not conscious, you could still be thinking. Consciousness does not mean thinking or not thinking. Consciousness means being able to interact with with the world around you, with what your senses perceive, with what you know to be true, and to operate within that, manipulate it, or go along with it. And so, I mean, and there's so many fascinating and incredible stories about people that are in comas, um, that they still think, and they can hear people talk to them, and they could have, they could think words, and they could try to respond, and we say that they're not conscious. We say that they're in a coma, they're a vegetable, they're unconscious, but they're still fun, they're still working, yeah, but they're not conscious because they can't interact with the world around them. They can't manipulate, they can't interact, they can't talk, they can't communicate. So so we're only so conscious as we are aware of the world and life around us. And I think that's really, really, I think this is one of the integral themes of prayer. The more aware you are of the world around you, and the more you're aware of how the world around you works. There's a Jewish philosopher, Maimonides, Rambam, Moshe ben Maimon, one of the all-time Jewish greats and incredible thinkers. He studied Aristotle, and he was a doctor, and he was just far beyond his time. And one of the things that he says, if you want to get to love God, he says, not fear God, if you want to love God and know God, you have to study his world, you have to participate in his world, you have to study science, you have to go, you have to travel, you have to experience it, you have to understand animals, you have to understand all of it. Because the more that you know, the more you could be those quote unquote eyes of the world. An example of some of this would be, I mean, there's a bunch of examples, but I went with my dad this past couple of nights ago to a concert, and the guy's name is C. Lansbaum. Extremely, oh man, A plus musician, A plus guitar player, and I think he's got a couple of Grammys. Um, Amazing, amazing musician. He's deadhead, and he plays a lot of Jewish music, music of Shlomo Carlebach, who is one of the great Jewish um, songwriters and and tune writers. Medley, he wrote a lot of some of the most famous Jewish tunes that are around today and still extremely prevalent, even though he died, I think, in the 90s. And um, and so we went to my dad and I went to this concert, and and my dad's been a fan of his music for 20 years now. And they're friends with one another, and he lives locally. He doesn't play enormous venues, but he'll play bars and cool, little theaters in Brooklyn. And my dad and I flew in to New York from Florida this past Thursday, so like the 26th or 7th, say, of December. And we went that night. My dad and I went together, and this is the first time I went to see him in probably 10, 15 years. I hadn't listened to his music in a long time. I hadn't seen him live in a long time. My dad's gone to 100 shows, but I never went with him. And by the way, not going with my dad to shows just because I was stubborn was one of the dumbest things I've ever done in my life. I've missed out on hearing the Marshall Tucker Band. I've missed out on hearing Meatloaf. I've missed out on hearing the Eagles. I've missed out on hearing some amazing bands. But so this guy C. Lansbaum and Noah Solomon are the two main musicians, and they they played a 15 song set. And I am not exaggerating when I say I believe that almost every, if not every song was a different genre of music that was played to an extremely high uh, that was played on an extremely high level. So, for example, they played the cover of the famous Elvis tune "Promised Land" that the Grateful Dead used to open or play a lot in their shows, and that's like an old school um, rock song that's got kind of that folk. I don't know if it's folk, country rock. That's what you'd call it. Um, Same kind of riff as Go Johnny Go. God, I can't believe the name's escaping me right now. But they played rock, they played reggae music, they played Jewish music, they played country music, they did Middle Eastern kind of music. They played so many songs so proficiently, and I was blown away while I was there. I was just there, and I was having the best time, and I could not believe how talented they were. Because I myself, for example, you know, I'm I'm playing guitar and I'm trying to figure out how to play. What's the difference between playing a blues song or a Grateful Dead song? What's the difference between playing a country song and a rock song? And what's the difference in pace? What's the difference in technique? What's the difference in the chords or chord structure? Or, is there a particular family of chords that are more popular in some genres over others? And how do you mess around with those sounds? And I have no idea how to do any of this, let alone play any of the ones I do know how to play extremely well. I don't yet, and I've become, I've been trying to learn about so much music, and I've been listening to so many new artists and so many new different genres, and I went to the same show that they probably have been putting on for 15, 20 years, and that I've heard 15, 20 years ago. And my level of appreciation and my level of awareness for the show was totally different because I understood at this point what goes into how much work it took for them to be as good as they were, and to appreciate how good and to understand that no, it's not just music that sounds good, but look at this technical, look at this technical proficiency. Look at their chemistry together. Look at how many instruments they play over the course of the night. Look at how not only is he playing rhythm guitar, he's soloing, and he's taking a slide. He's playing slide guitar. Look at how the other guy is playing percussion and guitar and mandolin, and and even though it's the exact same experience that I had with an elevated level of consciousness, with an elevated level of awareness of what it takes to be that good, I had a much better time than I've ever had in my entire life due to this enhanced consciousness, right? My enhanced awareness, my enhanced love for music, my evolved and developed appreciation for what I was experiencing, even though it was great before and it was great now, but the only thing that changed was my understanding of it. I think, so the first source of prayer comes from the beginning of creation in the Bible, in the, you call it the Torah, the original, the 5 books of Moses, the Bible, the Old Testament, and one of the things that when God created the world, it says, perhaps physically, perhaps literally, perhaps not, that God was that there was no rain that came down to earth, and that earth was actually, that the life on earth, the plants and the grass and the whatever, was actually being sustained from the ground, from moisture in the ground. And at some point, God was waiting for man to look around. It was waiting for man to emerge, right, to evolve, to be created, and then to look around and then say, "Hey, wait a minute. I love strawberries, but it doesn't look. It seems like my strawberry bush patch tree, whatever it's called, needs needs a little bit more water than my banana tree does, right? So my strawberry needs probably my strawberry bush, whatever you call it, needs probably twice as much water as my banana tree. Um, I got to take care of that, and then man would consequently or subsequently pray to God with this newfound awareness and say, "Hey, man, hey, God, I'm just letting you know, I'm down here. Your earth is doing great. I'm loving it. But just so you know, it looks like your strawberries need a little bit more water, and it looks like your bananas are getting a little bit too much water, right?" And now, obviously, let's say that story is not true. And let's say that story, even though the notion of what prayer is and does for us is true, right? I think the notion of prayer is a call to enhanced awareness of what the world around us and what life around us needs, including ourselves, but everyone and everything in our lives. And in Judaism, in the Jewish prayers at least, the central prayer um, uses collective language, right? Please help us with our pain. Please help us with, please redeem us and bring us back to Jerusalem. Please redeem us, please help us be emotionally and financially and physically healthy and successful, right? But it's not in the individual, it's in the collective. And part of the reason why it's the collective is because if prayer is truly a call for enhanced consciousness, then you have to think about other people. Then you have to participate with the world around you. You have to build community. And that's probably why I can imagine that in Judaism, prayer is ideally done with a group of 10 people, right? 10 men. Um, because ideally, that enhanced level of awareness is we all realize that it has to be a communal experience subconsciously when we can only pray as a community. So, you're not praying. It's better to not pray by yourself. It's even better. There's different levels in Judaism of ideals when it comes to prayer. Ideally, there's supposed to be a designated place, a designated spot with a group of 10 or more people. If you can't be with 10 or more people, it's important to go back to that designated spot and designated place. If you're not going to go to that designated spot or designated place, then pray wherever you are, wherever you can. But there's different, because at least, but what that's showing you, I think, or what those values seem to be implying, or straight out telling us, hitting us over the head with, is a prayer is not a prayer without a sense of community and looking at the world around you like it's part of your community. And there's no such thing as you just praying by yourself for yourself, because then you're not conscious. If prayer is going to be a call to consciousness, and consciousness is our ability to perceive other people and to communicate with other people and to understand other people and to interact with them, then how are you going to do that by yourself? How are you going to do that if you're only thinking about yourself? It's paradoxical. They're antithetical to one another. And if you're not going to actually be able to physically be with those people, put yourself in the location where those people come, and get yourself in that mindset. We do know that where we are has an impact on the way that we think, especially if we have strong associations there. The way that I behave, I mean, for better or for worse, when I visit my parents' house is very different than the way I behave in a synagogue, and very different than the way that I behave in my own house that I built with my wife. And different rooms mean different things to me because I associate different rooms, different experiences. My bedroom is not generally a place where I work. And when I'm sitting in my bedroom and on my computer, it's hard for me to get myself into a working state of mind. But if I'm at my kitchen table and the kitchen table is clear, and and the room around me is clean, that's the environment that I'm used to working in, and it gets me into that zone, into that state of mind. And the same thing I think would apply to prayer in that sense, right? Where you're saying, well, this room that I'm in is associated with gathering of people, personalities. I have one friend that's struggling with this. I have another friend that's struggling with that. I know that my friend is looking for a better job, or looking to make more money, or is having a hard time raising his kids, or spending as much time with his wife as he would like. And I I'm in the room where I'm thinking about all of them, and then when I go pray, it's this enhanced. This I'm in an advanced headspace where I'm really, really, truly thinking, not just inward, but I'm actually thinking outward, and I'm actually thinking in terms of what does the world around me need to be better, to be successful. If I am the eyes of the world, then what does that mean and what does that need? So I don't necessarily believe that prayer is exclusively for asking for things, but I think that prayer is an invitation. I think that prayer is an invitation to participate in the world around you, to help establish a sense of community, to establish a sense of caring, and to establish a sense of intentionality, that I am going out of my way to be aware of other people, to be aware of what the world around me needs, what nature needs, what my backyard needs, what my house needs. What am I looking for? And it's funny because the prayers that, at least that, that I say in when I'm in Judaism, um, you would think that if it's going to be a purely spiritual pursuit, it wouldn't focus on physical things. It should focus on keep me connected with God, keep me pure of heart, keep me pure of mind. But it's not just that. It's it's revolving around money. It's revolving around nature. It's revolving around your home, your community, where you live. It's revolving around national identity and our neighbor's success. Like all of that is so cool, and and it shows where the priorities are. So actually, I really never thought I never spoke a lot of this out, and I'm really happy that I am doing that because I think that it's really useful, and I think that it's also really true. I don't think that prayer has to be associated with or even correlated with believing in God, talking to God. Listen, I don't know. The one thing I know that God exists, but I don't know what God is. I know what God isn't. I know that God is not a big dude in the sky with a white beard that gets mad whenever we do good things and angry whenever we do bad things. And it's like the expression I always heard that stuck with me was the notion of a cosmic zookeeper, right? God is not this, imagine if you like in SeaWorld, we're Shamu and we do a couple of flips for him and then he throws us a couple of fish. That's not what God is. That's not what God wants. I mean, I don't think that's what, that seems kind of childish to me. So, I think God is the force of life and the collective, and that's what, again, Maimonides says. He describes God as the force that pushes the ball that keeps that keeps all life going. All life is kind of just like a circle and a process. Galgali calls it. Galgal in Hebrew is a wheel, and God is the driving force of the wheel. He's everything. Everything stems from it, and it's the pushing force. But it's certainly not a person. I don't think, right? Even if you're not going to pray to a typical God per se, the notion of expanding our consciousness is probably an incredible exercise for us. The notion of practicing enhanced awareness to the other people in our community, especially other people that are taking the time to strive to also be praying, that are also taking the time to strive to be connecting to the community in some sort of way, even if you don't know them. The fact that you guys are have that perspective and have that similarity in your train of thought already makes you family and connected. And I think that's why we have a designated community. That's why almost every religion usually tends to have designated community places. And it's not just because it wants to be inconvenient. I think that a big part of it is because you can't have the prayer without the community. You can't have enhanced consciousness if there's nothing to be conscious of. If you're just sitting in your house, you're just sitting in your bedroom within the four corners of your own domain, then what are you really accomplishing? What are you connecting to? Who are you connecting to? What are you representing and who are you representing? And what do you care if there's no one else around? And yeah, you could be selfish insofar as okay, you know what? I'm just going to be working for myself and praying for myself. But we know that that's not a good plan because you know that anyone that just exclusively looks out for themselves, first of all, you get stuck because we don't have all the tools that it takes to be to be the best version of ourselves. That's why we have friendships. That's why we have partnerships. That's why people that's why we have other people. That's why we're social animals, because we're inherently flawed, and we kind of look for other people and other partners to fill in the gaps where we're missing out. So it's not even in our best interest to only be isolated. We have to work with other people. We have to be connected to a community. And and it's so interesting because a lot of people talk about this notion, on a more hippie, spiritual, psychedelic level, experience. They say that that we're part of a collective consciousness. How do you get to collective consciousness if you're not going to be aware of anyone else around you or anything else around you? It's impossible. So if we really do believe that the true goal of humanity and the way that we evolve and the way we move forward and the way that we become interplanetary, or that human consciousness survives past if any kind of event happens to Earth, asteroid, meteor, earthquake, nuclear, anything happens, it's going to be we need our consciousness we need our consciousness to survive, and this is the way that keeps it going. So I tend to think of it as actually an evolutionary tool to make sure that we succeed, that make sure that we continue living, growing, that the light of consciousness does not get extinguished. So those are just some initial thoughts, just based on Huberman's podcast with Jordan Peterson on the prayer part in particular. I wanted to also take a couple of minutes because it is, in fact, December 31st. And I've been doing this podcast now for just about 6 months, since, I don't know, June or July. And just some notes that, or highlights that I was thinking about, that towards the end of the year, I have put out officially 68 episodes. 17 of those episodes, of those 68, were solo episodes. Um, I've had 30 I've had, I think, 30 or 31 guests on the show, different guests rather, even though a couple of them have come on more than once, which, is probably going to keep on happening because it's a lot of fun. And just to name not some of the people, but some of the things that the people that I've spoken to do or have done or passionate about. We have accountants. I have craft beer enthusiasts and seafood, and someone Herman started his own seafood import and exporting business. Zach was the accountant, and really, he travels, he exercises, he's someone that's very, very participatory in his life, just, and really lives, like, he's a great example of someone that has an expanded sense of consciousness, because he's really great at caring for the world around him. I have a Vrummy who's been on the podcast a bunch of times, who does biochem and food chemistry. Um, and you have Oren Mendelo, who has a wood shop, workshop, teaches entrepreneurship. He started a company, a Kickstarter for koala boards, which is these skateboards that are magnetically attached to your backpack, so you could skate with them, and then you could just swing them over your shoulder, and it clips onto your backpack. You have Sam Chosak, who's a beer brewer. You have Avami Orlansky, who started his own businesses in ABA therapy, in real estate, and is a big part of his community in terms of the Jewish life. You have Max Klein, who started his own ticket brokerage company. You have Chaim Krieger, James Rowland, who trades stocks for himself and uses a website called Discord, where people subscribe to his opinion, to hear his thoughts and opinions, and that's part of his income and revenue. Jacob Danis is a film producer, director, and a musician. But yeah, you have so many different people in so many different walks of life. Yosef Hoffman owns a private hotel, and manages himself. Max Cantor does social work and Jewish outreach. I mean, you know, there's just I had so many wonderful guests on, and I had so many exciting friends, and I have so many exciting people in my life, and so many amazing people in my life, that 30. I mean, listen, starting a podcast is not easy. Getting guests is not easy or fun. But when I actually do it, when I record, and when I put it out. It's one of my favorite things to do. A couple of other things that were just recapping from 2024. I sold a house. I was homeless briefly. I bought a house, which was extremely scary. Um, I spent a month living in Orlando. I spent 2 months living in New York. I'd gone to three concerts to hear new band playing by myself, which was definitely a challenging experience. I did a month without alcohol, which for the first time in over a decade of my life, which is really crazy. I lost about 25 pounds. Um, I came back to teaching. I started watching UFC this year. I stopped watching basketball, which I'm a little sad about, but that's okay. And because it feels like there's very little stakes in the NBA nowadays, and the league kind of doesn't feel very competitive to me, at least. But these are just these are just some of the exciting. These are some exciting moments of. I've read a bunch of new books, top new podcasts that I've listening to that I've discovered that I think that are worth checking out. Diary. Tim Dillon's weekly podcast, part of the Problem podcast with Dave Smith, who is a leftish. I don't even know if I'd even call him left. I guess historically left leaning libertarian who, despite my disagreements with him on his take on the Israel Palestine war, is a brilliant, articulate, and funny guy. Really very smart. Sean Ryan, who I think I like his guests more than I like his interviewing style. Not to say anything bad about him or his interviewing style, it just doesn't speak to me the same way that that a couple other that the other podcasts do. And the Martyr Made podcast truly had an enormous impact on who I am today, my perspective, my understanding of history, the Jewish-Palestinian conflict, or the Jonestown um, cult with Jim Jones, or the blacks and the Jews, historical fights in America leading up to the '60s, or at least their alliance, and then the break apart in the '60s and '70s. All those things I learned for the Martyr Made podcast. That was absolutely something that was worth. Those are absolutely worth checking out. The books, some of the books that I read that I've mentioned before, Tripped, who the author, I think Norman Oswell was his name, was on Rogan talking. He wrote a book called Blitzed and Tripped. Blitz is about the Nazis' use of methamphetamines and other drugs during World War II. Tripped is about the psychedelic history and connection between Nazi Germany, Switzerland, and the CIA in America, and when they can, and how during Project Paperclip by the CIA, where they brought a lot of Nazi scientists over, along came LSD and other forms of psychedelics to be used as either a truth serum or to manipulate people's behavior or to cure depression or other mental health illnesses. That book, Tripped, is excellent. American Cartel, which I've mentioned too, about the fight between the DEA and the pharmaceutical companies. Chatter is Chatter is an interesting book. Chatter, I think, is really important, but I think it's a little difficult to kind of make your way through the whole book. I think I'd recommend listening to the author of Chatter, Ethan Cross, on Andrew Huberman's podcast. The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is an absolute 10 out of 10 must read. And yeah, I think that 2024, it's funny because this is I turned 29 just a couple of weeks ago, and this was the first time in my life that I truly felt comfortable and at home and in my skin with my birthday and where I am in my life at the point of my birthday. And I feel grateful, and I feel so lucky, and I feel so honored and privileged to be able to live the life that I'm living and to push myself to the places that I don't know where they're going to lead, but I know that it's going to be something good and something fun. And I just, I, I love everything about my life. I love everything about my friends, my support group, my family, my, I love, I just have so much love and gratitude to everyone and the world around me. And I really, and I thank everyone. I thank everyone for, for allowing this person named Ephraim Herschmann to emerge the way that I have, and and that the world hasn't beat me down so much so that I can't handle it. I could, and it's given me the space to grow, and I've been able to do it. So I feel extremely lucky. 2025 is going to be amazing. Hopefully the podcast is going to grow. My teaching is going to grow. My family is going to grow. Hopefully business will grow. Although, care more about the podcast and teaching. But thank you everyone for everything that you do. Happy New Year's, and I will see you later this week. Bye, everyone.